All right, fantastic. So I am pleased today to be here on behalf of the InsurTech Association, um, hosting an event called Monetizing Innovation Strategies for InsurTechs. And I'm here today with Michael Nadell. He is a partner and head of the North American insurance practice at Simon Kucher. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, Josh, thanks for having me.
Great. So just to recap, today we're going to talk about best practices for building building monetization models at scale, avoiding pricing and packaging pitfalls, and monetizing AI and Gen AI driven innovations. Michael will be doing a masterclass at InsurTech Connect Vegas on October 14th, including panelists from carriers and InsurTechs and an interactive workshop. And this is going to be a preview of that session at ITC. I'm just going to share a little bit of info here about the InsurTech Association before we jump into it. So the ITA is a US-based nonprofit community focused on innovation in insurance. In other words, InsurTech. We are open to all, and we strive to provide year-round value through expert guidance, regulatory and AI insights, curated networking, and practical programming, accelerating the startup process. We offer support through educational opportunities, networking, shared resources through our community boards, and mentorship as well. As mentioned, we are open, so a large number of our members are earlier in stage InsurTechs, but we do have traditional insurers and MGAs, investors, agents and brokers, vendors and other consultants, some of the other community partners out there, and others like regulators, etc. We're fortunate to have a number of great sponsors, including our platinum sponsor, eClaro. This entire group is part of our founding sponsor group, and we have additional sponsorship opportunities on an annual basis as well as for events. Sponsorship obviously provides some brand visibility, includes opportunities for speaking and webinar hosting opportunities, access to founders and other innovators in the ecosystem, and connections to talent acquisition through the community. We do have ourselves our own event at ITC, which will be a cocktail party on Wednesday evening from 6 to 8 p.m. at RERA. We hosted this event last year, and we had a line out the door. So I would suggest register to attend sooner than later, as we already are starting to fill up with requests to attend so far. So hope to see you there. And that's our website, InsurTechAssociation.org. You can also reach us at info@association.org if you have any questions. So I'm going to pop that out and just give Michael a quick intro. So as I mentioned, he's a partner and head of the North American insurance practice at Simon Kucher. He has more than a decade of experience in insurance and financial services, focused on helping insurance carriers, InsurTechs, and insurance service providers with monetization, pricing, product, packaging, and sales strategies. This includes improving cross-selling, bundling, and customer segmentation, optimizing pricing, value management, and operations for better performance, as well as leveraging game mechanics, AI, and data analytics to future-proof distribution and carrier agent models. Welcome, Michael. I just want to say there's an ability to submit questions, which we will see. So you can feel free to submit questions at any time, and we will have a Q&A period at the end. So again, Michael, take it away.
Absolutely. Yeah, and please do ask questions. I'm going to try and share my screen here. Let's give this a go.
think you got it there.
You see my screen?
Yep.
All right. Well, I can no longer see you, so you give me a eye sign if there's questions or people are asking. But
I will.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for having me today, Josh. I am Michael Nadell. I'm a partner, as Josh mentioned, at a firm called Simon Kutcher. I live in the northern suburbs of Chicago in an area called Deerfield. And really excited to be talking to this group today and giving really a teaser for the masterclass on this topic that we're hosting at InsurTech Connect in Vegas later next month. So Josh already did a bit of an intro on me, but as he mentioned, I run our practice here at Simon Kutcher in North America, focused on the insurance industry, and we have a really sort of unique offering as a firm. And I'll tell you more about Simon Kutcher in a minute. Just in how we service the industry. So we do work with the carriers, agents, and brokers on traditional insurance strategy topics. But then we also service all of the folks that sell things into the insurance industry. With InsurTechs obviously being a big part of that, but also think about TPAs, managed repair companies, glass repair, all of the things that are required to sort of make the insurance industry run effectively. And on the latter half of that category, we really heavily focus on helping with monetization and growth related strategies. So, the topic for today and our topic at ITC is really around that monetization for growth, focusing on InsurTechs and insurance service providers. Prior to being at Simon Kutcher, I was at CNA, come from the industry where I was running the innovation function within the strategy team there at CNA. And prior to that was at Accenture. So very happy to be talking to you today. Just a little bit about Simon Kutcher. So as I mentioned, we are a strategy consulting firm, global firm, 40 years old. We've got about 2,500 employees around the world in 31 different countries. And the firm was founded as a pricing specialist. And so we've retained that moniker of the world's leading pricing firm. And over the 40 years, we've grown into touch on topics that are really around growth and growth oriented, which expands further beyond just pricing. I'll talk about that in 1 second. We cover all the different sectors, which I won't go into because here today we're focusing on financial services and insurance where I reside. So when we think about growth, typically it comes in a couple of different areas, right? So in the bottom right where we're talking today, do you have the right price? Is it set up the right way ultimately to extract the right value from your customers?
Michael, I think we're still seeing the cover page of the deck.
Okay. Now you're seeing?
Yeah, we see like your user side. Now we see a circle chart.
Yeah. Is it moving?
On the bottom right. Yeah, we don't see it full screen though.
That's weird. Okay. I'll leave it in this mode if it doesn't bother you.
That's better. Yep.
Okay. So when we think about the elements of growth, it comes down to sort of these 4 buckets, right? So setting in the bottom right corner, talking about price strategy, bringing it together, what you ultimately charge, how you charge for it. Sales excellence, so thinking about making sure your teams are effectively set up to actually sell the products. So if you think about compensation, territory design, quota setting, sales capabilities, the actual go-to-market strategy, so enabling and tying marketing to your sales strategy, your channel and partner strategy, and that customer engagement model, and then the value proposition. So thinking about how you can structure your offering or packaging or bundling strategy. What is your product roadmap, product feature allocation? For today's conversation, we're really going to focus heavily on these 2 items on the right-hand side around the value proposition and price strategy. So now give me 1 second, Josh, because I've got slides in here I need to now hide since it's not in presenting mode.
Sorry about that.
It's okay, no worries. Give me one
Do you want
second.
me to take it off screen for a sec? Or you did that. All right.
Yeah, just give me 1 second because I had it set up to go in presenter mode.
Maybe it's just presenting the wrong screen somehow. I don't know.
I've only got one, so
Okay.
give me just 2 seconds.
No problem.
Okay. That should not be right. All right, are we back?
I gotta put you up. There we go. All right, we're back.
Okay. So I won't drain this. Within software, we've worked with pretty much everybody across every industry, and then as well in the insurance ecosystem, worked with most of the big players. As we think about this monetization strategy topic and the way that we're going to discuss it as a part of the masterclass, we really think about it over the evolving context of a company. So what's sort of necessary to drive growth and adoption for early stage companies, and what the needs are around monetization, packaging, or pricing look very different for a pre-seed Series A company than it might a Fortune 500 company who is already at scale in the market and thinking about things that are maybe cross-sell, upsell related versus a Series A or early stage company who's really thinking about customer adoption. So monetization strategies evolve over the life cycle of a company. And during our masterclass at ITC, we'll really sort of put that into perspective of what we see in success, not only in the InsurTech space, but more broadly in software as well, across multi-industries. So today you're hearing from me for our masterclass at ITC. You'll also hear from a partner colleague of mine, Sarah Yamase, who leads our global software practice generally. So moving into the topics for today. When we think about monetization, we really think about it sort of as this 9-step process. People often hear the word monetization and immediately think about price and pricing, and it's really just a lot more than that aspect alone. So starting with understanding your customer's willingness to pay. Very often we actually see this sort of being the last step in the product development lifecycle. People go out and build a product, they assume what people want to be in it, and then later they try and figure out what they should charge for it. And our advice is essentially do the exact opposite. You want to figure out what people's willingness to pay is early and what they value, and build a product around that and customer feedback instead of what you assume people want and or would be willing to pay for. The second step of this is thinking about segmentation of your customers. So can you identify different needs-based segments that exist within your customers, or demographic segments? So sometimes this is the number of seats, how big a company is, sometimes it's location oriented. But when you're able to get more deep and understand that needs-based segmentation, which I'll talk about in a little bit, you can start to figure out ultimately the appropriate and easiest way to sell to different segments of your customers that maximize the value that they get from the product, as well as ultimately the price you're able to extract from it. Once you've accomplished these two things, you can start to design the packages and bundling, which we'll talk about in depth today. Picking then the right revenue model overall, which is broader than just your actual price strategy. And so today we'll go into 3 through 5 in detail, and I'll touch on items 1 and 2. Post this, it's an ongoing process in items 6 through 9. We won't discuss those today, but I'm happy to take questions from folks if they want to hear more about what happens after you've brought price into the market and how you sort of maintain that. All right, so I'm going to start with the importance of packaging. In here, you're also going to hear elements of AI and AI related strategies as they influence traditional packaging and pricing design, because obviously that's the hottest topic at the moment, and we're seeing a lot of movement there. So just starting with packaging overall. So why does packaging matter? And the reality is that packaging is a strategy that is ultimately used to extract the most willingness to pay you can from your customer base. And I think this chart in the top right does a really good job of describing, how that works. If you offer a single product at a single price, you have a set of customers that are willing to pay for it. And if you think about the area under the curve of this chart as being your potential customer base, you're only able to capture the customers that it fits, in its current state for. But when you create a package design, a good example of this on the page is the McDonald's value meal. You start to be able to think about different bundles or structures that might meet different needs. So the example on the right, in the top right corner, starts to show the ability of maybe using a good, better, best type of strategy that captures a segment of the customers that want, the most features that you have and are willing to pay more, down to the people that just want the bare bones and have very low willingness to pay. When you can extract out sort of the value under that curve and the customers that have the different needs, you can start to transfer willingness to pay from a product that they probably wouldn't have bought on its own into a bundle and increase the overall sort of willingness to pay as a whole. So this is the psychology behind packaging and why it's so critical. So just hitting on a couple of elements here.
Michael, can I jump in for 1 second?
Please do.
So I wouldn't necessarily say this, and if you'd rather save the questions to the end, we certainly can. But
sure,
it's up to you. But someone made a comment, not necessarily a question. What customers are willing to pay is often overlooked because entrepreneurs focus on their own perspective rather than the users.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? And I sort of had a related question, which is, particularly, I mean, we've seen it in insurance and InsurTech, where people come in, maybe they've got some technology or data set or whatever it is, and have an idea, but they don't really know the industry. So, like, how do you approach that when you don't know, and how do you, as maybe someone can't afford your services at this point? Do you have any perspective you can share?
Well, the point is exactly right. I mean, I think it takes a lot of guts and hubris to be an entrepreneur in the first place, right? And so entrepreneurs have a lot of self-confidence and go into building a business often with a bit of hubris around their offering and what is required. We have a book on this topic called Monetizing Innovation, which really talks about those 9 steps that I was discussing. And in order to basically make sure that you don't build something and then can't figure out why people won't pay for it or what they don't like in it, what we talk about and what the book really goes into detail about is really starting with customer focused research. All of our work takes almost all of our work takes a hypothesis driven market research focus. So typically we'll meet with customers, whether they are developing their first model or product, or whether it's something that's been in the market for years, and do the research basically to understand, like, what is it that people actually want out of a product? What do they value? And then going back to that conversation around customer segmentation, understanding if there's differentiation that exists there. From that type of research, you can then build up the product set and or the pricing and sales strategy that ultimately matches to customer needs. It's really, really hard when you build a product and bring it to market without doing that research to then figure out, why are people maybe not adopting it at the scale that I want? What don't they like within my product? And if you, after the fact, go out and ask somebody sort of that question, typically it'll come back to something like, oh, it's too expensive. But the reality under that statement might be, well, you put 3 features in this product that like I just don't need. You know, it embeds a CRM capability and I already use Salesforce. Well, that might be a segment specific thing. Like if you're an enterprise customer with 500 plus employees, you already have a CRM, for instance. Understanding the needs and segments enables you to basically go out and build and package and sell for purpose.
Makes sense. All right. I don't want to take you off course.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, I mean, it's a great segue into what I was going to say right here, which is starting before you design the offering with an understanding of that willingness to pay. So essentially looking at this chart, we talk about the willingness to pay on the y-axis and how important that feature is enables you to start to think about, you know, where does this fit within the mix of my products? What elements do people ultimately value within my product, and what price or willingness to pay do they prescribe to those features? Within that same context, we typically talk about this using a framework that we call leader, filler, killer, and add-on analysis. And it highlights, you know, the images here are like the McDonald's Happy Meal, and it's a great way to sort of explain this. But if you think about a package as a set of features or goods in a software product, it's analogous in a lot of ways to like a value meal at a fast food restaurant. So when you go to McDonald's, in this case, to get a value meal, there's typically a leader product that exists within the package. It's the thing that brought people ultimately to you. It's the core thing that is needed by all and valued by all. So some people that's a hamburger, for other people that's, you know, chicken nuggets, whatever it is, right? Your product is then typically also made up of fillers, a mixture of regular fillers and premium fillers. So things that, you know, generally people want, but it might not be the reason that they would come to McDonald's alone. Now, I get some people go to McDonald's just for fries, but for the sake of this example, you know, the fillers, right, in this case, you know, fill that space for the French fries here. And then you end up with things like add-ons, which in this case is like a cup of coffee, where it's highly valued by those that ultimately want it, but it's not valued by a large portion of your population. Now, one of the sort of anecdotes around like the original formulation of the Happy Meal was that it included a cup of coffee as a part of the original design. And the idea was that parents were bringing their kids ultimately to McDonald's to get a meal. And so parents would really value getting a cup of coffee. But what they learned was it was actually viewed as what we have here as a killer, as a part of the package. You know, I didn't ask for this. This is a tax. I didn't want to pay for it. And so they misprescribed sort of the value that people put on it and how much it would be adopted. In package design, understanding sort of the general value of your products is critical in this format to ultimately constructing a package that will be valued by your customer segments. And I think it goes without saying, you want to make sure that killer type of features ultimately don't make their way into a package. And going back to the comment about entrepreneurs sort of misunderstanding what customers want, people often build a company because of a challenge that they faced in the market. They assume that it's, you know, something that's valued by many, and sometimes they're building in these types of killers in their products because they don't have that customer level research to validate that it is something that's actually valued or packaged correctly into the product set. So just very quickly here, you know, packaging comes in our experience in roughly these 5 types of shapes. Moving from the left side with really the least flexible and very simple model of like an all you can eat. Think of like a Netflix here, you pay for it and you get access to everything that they have. To the other end of the spectrum, which is the most flexible, but it's also the most complex and most negotiated in a pricing or build your own type of solution. Often, you know, what we find is if we come in and people are using a build your own type of solution, it's most often because it's a really easy sort of cop out to say, well, my customers just want lots of different things, and therefore, this is the easiest way to sell. But the reality is you're actually making the sales cycle much more complex. You're likely putting yourself into situations that require deep negotiation and making the outcome, in our experience, less efficient and optimal for both sides of the party. So we often see people in forms that are on the left four as being the most effective, with the middle three being the most sort of common outcomes. So use case packages being those that are specific to a very specific segment of customers. If you think of TurboTax as an example, they create packages designed for people, that are very adept at doing their own taxes, and then people that have never, done their taxes and don't know anything about it, right? So making a package that fits each need. In the middle is good, better, best, which many are familiar with, and it's exactly what it sounds. You offer a good version, a better, and the best option. And then finally, there's this concept of platform versus add-ons, where, going back to our last example, you might have the hamburger as the platform, and you can purchase the relevant add-ons that are segment specific in their value and needs. So during our masterclass, we'll go a little bit deeper on these different package structures, who they fit for, and ultimately how to develop effective packaging design. But I'm gonna move into packaging related to AI features for right now, before going into pricing and its importance. So AI, you probably hear in every conversation that you're in. It's probably in most of your products that for those that are listening. And we ran a software study about 2 years ago, and at the time we asked different software companies, essentially, are you planning to launch an AI feature within the next year? And 92% of people ultimately said that they were going to over that 2-year period. 76 of those said that they have now officially actually launched, which means that roughly 16% of people failed to actually bring to market some form of AI feature as a part of their product set. Now, when we also ran this study at the time, what we saw was that a large majority of the people that were planning to launch an AI feature had two key components. One, the first was that there wasn't a great or defined monetization strategy for those AI features. And a big reason for that was a large percentage of the people that were making a plan to launch one of these features were going to launch some sort of internally focused AI feature. And we still hear that today, especially within the insurance industry, given the regulatory aspects that we all have to live into. So chatbots internally for efficiency, document generation capabilities for sales teams, but a hesitance to really bring the AI features directly to the consumer for a lot of the reasons that ultimately you can imagine. Now, when we reran this study, 96% of people said that they plan to launch one over the next 24 months. So there's just more sort of momentum being built in this space. I'm not going to go into it in today's conversation, but for our masterclass in Vegas, we'll talk about how to think about your new AI features and your specific packaging or offering architecture, and how we're seeing companies, roll those out under different structures. So, for instance, do you roll your new AI feature into your best package and offer it only to your highest paying and biggest user groups? Do you offer it as a beta to customers to try and get better appetite and then later upsell them? We'll talk about what we're seeing in terms of effective strategies in the market and ultimately the trends that we're seeing within InsurTech and the broader software space here. All right. Any questions, Josh, on packaging? I can't see the chat or what's going on. So
is that... Yeah, I think one of the questions relates to packaging, like more in an insurance product or an MGA model.
Yep.
And do you have any examples relative to that killer filler chart there of people have done that effectively?
Yeah. So we recently helped a national personal lines insurer redesigned their home, auto, condo, and renters products into good, better, best structures. And so, the situation at hand with this particular carrier was they were looking to attract a younger customer base than what they had today. And historically, they've been offering a single product that was very feature rich, really servicing the high end of the non-high net worth segment. As a part of the research, ultimately what we went out and did was interview different customer segments and try to extrapolate, what are we actually seeing here? Is it all about demographics? Are there other things that are at play that sort of define what people generally want within a product? And we did the market research both in a qualitative and quantitative way to figure out like what are the features that people ultimately care about. And we learned a couple of things that like 3 defined sort of segments came out. There was basically a price sensitive shopper, someone who wanted like strong coverage, and someone who was really just looking for full white glove service. And underneath those needs, the demographic segments that came out were pretty striking. So, probably unsurprising, younger customers were much more price sensitive, but we also found that was tied to having experience ultimately with some sort of claim. Once people had an experience with a claim, they typically shifted into one of the other 2 customer segments that I described, because they now had actually utilized the insurance product. They probably read the coverages for the first time, really understood what they were actually being covered for, and bought insurance with a different mindset than looking at it like a commodity. And so, for instance, the question was like the features within the product. Like we found out for those latter 2 customer segments that things like service line coverage mattered a lot more to them. They probably experienced something, with a sewer line coming from their city into their house, causing damage to their property that a first-time insurance buyer wouldn't think to ask for. That would be a killer in your good package, but it works very well in your better and your best. So the same context works within the insurance product as it does for software offerings.
So that's kind of interesting how something can be a killer in one spot and not in another.
Yeah. It really, again, it just goes back to like understanding your customer segments and who you're selling to, because even for people, going back to McDonald's, like if in every meal it included a fillet of fish, like that's not for everybody, right? But it is for a segment of customers that want it. And for McDonald's in the same instance, it's a big draw during the time of year of Lent, for instance. Like there is a customer segment for that they are targeting and marketing. So again, you can package and bundle and sell appropriately if you understand who it is you're selling to. But if you treat everybody the same way, you will ultimately alienate a segment of your customers. And going back to that sort of area under the graph view where we started, you will misprice for a segment and underprice for another.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's go into pricing. So pricing, in our view, is the most effective profit lever, right? So when you're thinking about your revenue model, your price strategy is critical, right? So pricing, often people just think about it as the price that you prescribe to the product, so $19.99. But there's so much more that goes into the overall price model. We often say how you charge for it is more important than what you charge for it. So thinking about the metrics that you use, the structures that you build into it. But this graph does a good job of sort of showing, how a 5% improvement in price, as opposed to improving, let's call it volume or your costs, drop to the bottom line. Every dollar of price while holding costs the same, ultimately drops immediately to profit. So getting the final sort of price level with the right metric has significant improvement on your ability to generate not only revenue, but profit, more importantly here. So, thinking about the revenue model that you're in more broadly. So, how are you able to ultimately bring a product to market, choose the right metrics or models to charge for, and then ultimately the level in our experience comes down to, a simple way of thinking about it is sort of this 2x2 here, and understanding sort of where you play within this space. So, starting across the x-axis, you have companies that are sort of smaller in terms of the annual value of the customer. So not necessarily that the overall customer base is small, but think about like TurboTax or Policy Genius in this example. You're getting a lot of smaller transactions that you are dealing with, more of a B2C motion as compared to the bottom right, where we talk about large annual deals. So Guidewire or Policy Admin is a great example of this, where you're selling a couple of very large enterprise B2B type of deals. On the y-axis, we're thinking about the category and sort of how new or established the market is. So the market, again, using Policy Genius is the example here. They're playing in a space that's very well established. It ultimately has been around for a while, this comparative rating and insurance space. And whereas on the new side, you might be creating a category or bringing a new capability to market. Your ability to define the revenue model, in our experience, depends on where you fall within this category. If you're one of these newer entrants, you have more sort of leeway in your ability to design what the model looks like and ultimately do more testing and learning with your clients to figure out what the price model is. As opposed to if you're in one of these established spaces, your ability to come in and completely disrupt from a pricing standpoint is usually pretty limited. You'll be more forced just by buyers' expectations and norms of how they have purchased in the past to define how you ultimately develop a model that will be acceptable. Typically, what we see is things start off in that bottom left-hand corner or top left and move over to the right. So what the Policy Admin vendors did around using DWP or GWP as a metric was a novel concept that now others have tried to pick up and take on, and they've sort of set the basis for charging for the other vendors in this space as a part of it. During our masterclass, we'll go into more detail about each of these different sort of archetypes and what the implications are as you think about revenue model design. Talking just a little bit then about like price metrics and ultimately how you charge for your products. We typically see 3 different types of primary categories prior to leading into AI monetization, which has created a 4th, which I'll tease out a little bit on the next slide. But you're thinking about the traditional sort of metrics. Are you charging by user? So the number of agents or brokers that use your platform, the number of adjusters, how many underwriters are actually touching the software. Are you using some form of usage-based metrics? So the number of claims that are actually processed through an application, or the number of risk assessments that you ultimately run. And then we see folks ultimately producing some form of hybrid combination of these. Now, again, going back to that revenue model will ultimately sort of dictate to a degree what you're able to sort of test out in here. But there's a balance towards simplicity versus sort of getting it exactly right. In our experience, we've seen a number of InsurTechs, not only new but very established companies, who really put too many metrics and sort of tracking mechanisms in their pricing in an effort to extract every pound of flesh from their customers in a way that actually disincentivize usage and has the converse impact of ultimately what you're trying to drive. So during our masterclass, we'll dive into each of these a little bit more and talk about where we see the success. But I think this leads me into the topic around AI monetization and how ultimately, we're thinking about that and teasing this out a little bit. So AI monetization, AI capabilities lead to different outcomes or similar outcomes in some cases to software offerings, but they change the way that we think about monetizing. And for us, another sort of 2x2 type of framework here around how to figure out which metric aligns to your AI offering. We think about it first, like on this top view of this, are you augmenting the role of the human, or are you ultimately looking for your solution to replace? A good example of where we saw early innovations fail on this and people are starting to figure it out is many AI solutions are meant to drive efficiency, and yet people are using user-based metrics. So as my tool gets more efficient, there's actually less people to use it, and therefore I generate less revenue, right? So that's one of the axes here to think about. Where on the scale do you ultimately fit from an augmentation or an automation standpoint? The second then lever here is thinking about the value that your service ultimately provides. This says quantifiable value and clear quantifiable value, but I think what's really sort of meant here, or the way that I typically talk about it, is in terms of how close to the end customer action is this activity actually driving. So like on the far left, it might be an internally focused tool that's meant to drive your company's efficiency. Well, that is very little to do, with actually generating revenue. On the far end of this, you might be doing something that's actually issuing a policy if you're a carrier, like a chatbot that issues insurance policies. That actually is at the end of the customer experience and a revenue generating opportunity. And depending on where the slider sort of falls across these two things, creates a nice 2x2 to think about ultimately what the right metric is for your model. And the more that we see people moving to the right on both of these is leading to a new type of metric, which we'll discuss in Vegas, which is really an outcome-oriented metric. So saying I will only, charge you, or you will only pay when the outcome that we are trying to drive actually ends up happening. And in a world where AI is handling things that traditionally were done by humans, the cost to service is lower, it's not zero. And so your ability to only get paid on positive outcomes becomes much more viable than it did traditionally in a model where your cost per transaction might have been much higher. What I will say that underpins a lot of this and where we see people sort of still kind of failing at this is misunderstanding the compute costs and things that are necessary to drive the AI type of innovations that people are delivering. I think a great example of this, and maybe it was just marketing, but it worked very well, was what Sam Altman talked about with OpenAI. When he announced their pricing $200 per month on Twitter, and then the next month came back and basically people asked how you came up with that, and he said I got it totally wrong. He just picked a number out of the air, and they didn't realize that people would be using ChatGPT to ask it please and thank you, like they were talking to a human, and the number of times that people were doing that alone drove the compute cost outside of what they expected. And so your ability to manage and understand the underlying cost of these AI innovations plays a different role in pricing than we've seen with many traditional SaaS software that's out there.
We have a question. So does the way you consider how value is created first flow into how you package and then into pricing, or are these different concepts?
No, so they are intertwined. And if you go back to, let me show this monetization framework. So if you first think about what people want who the different type of people are that ultimately want what you have to offer, it then enables you to figure out what the right offering structure should be. So think about this as like breaking apart I keep using software as an example. So your software offering into the 10 features ultimately that make it up. That enables you to figure out a packaging strategy that you can then prescribe the right revenue model onto. So the monetization strategy sort of follows the formula that I've been prescribing here in terms of the steps in which you would figure out the optimal way to sell it in an offering structure or package or bundle, and then figure out the revenue model that optimizes the goal that you're trying to drive, which is not the same for everybody, right? Early stage companies, going back to that chart that I started with, might have a goal of driving a user adoption in order to increase their valuation or get to their next funding round, which might be different than a company that's already at scale who's really focused on profit over revenue, for instance. So the packaging and bundling, or packaging and pricing, are very related and tied ultimately to those business objectives.
So if I could ask a follow-up question to that, just from my own perspective. So I know with some of the AI tools, people thought, well, if I can reduce headcount for companies, then I should be able to get into their personnel budget. Is that like a good way of thinking, or is that just short-term thinking and not really something that's ultimately sustainable?
Can you say a little more? So like you have a solution that can help them to reduce efficiency.
There's a call center with 1,000 people, and you can
Yep.
put in a solution, and now that turns into 100 people or 50 people or 10 people or whatever the number is. Then the thought was, well, I should be able to get a piece of whatever that labor cost was of the 900
the value-based pricing.
Yeah.
The value-based pricing. I mean, absolutely, right? So that is like going back to sort of this archetype scenario, right? Here, where all of the AI stuff, to a degree, I mean, and again, AI is a largely used buzzword that means a lot of different things. And some people are taking what was just traditional technology and now calling it AI, like OCR technology, document extraction, has been around for a long time. And now you're seeing people just relabel it as AI related technology. But for truly new innovations as a part of this, your ability to define that revenue and price model is strong, right? And if you can convey your pricing model in a way that's based off of an ROI-oriented sale, you can absolutely make your price dependent on the value that you prescribe. Now, it typically is going to create a much longer sales cycle and a complicated sale if each and every deal that you sell is about value extraction in relation to the customer that you're dealing with, versus a more typical price model that's easier to purchase that just says, an outcome or something that's transactional that they can rely on and maybe digest a little bit easier. But it's not out of bounds to do what you're saying.
Okay, thanks.
So that actually takes us to the end of the content. So for each of these different elements, we'll obviously have more time to go more in depth in our masterclass at ITC on these topics. As Josh mentioned in the beginning of the call, the masterclass is made up of 3 elements. So there's a presentation from myself and my partner colleague, Sarah, who I mentioned in the beginning of the meeting. The second portion of the masterclass includes a panel of carriers as well as InsurTechs. And the idea here is for the audience to be able to hear from this panel ultimately of what is important to buyers and how they're seeing some of that change with technological advancements like AI. Which AI elements are being most adopted or of interest from a carrier perspective, and then getting the seller's perspective of InsurTech services and how they're seeing that change from companies that are, of a larger scale, right? So we've got large commercial line carrier in CNA. We've got a personal line carrier in Amica. we've got Google coming to talk about their role that they're playing with insurance, and then large InsurTech in Verisk, which should give really unique perspectives on monetization and just general InsurTech trends that we're seeing. And then finally, the masterclass will end with an interactive workshop. So teams will be able to break out into groups on pricing, packaging, AI, and go through an actual use case example, that we would essentially have seen in the market. So we can simulate the way that we would problem solve some particular use cases and actually get hands-on. So shaping up to be a good session. Would love to see the folks that are on the call join us there. And yeah, thanks, Josh, for having me. I'm happy to answer more questions and hope to see the audience at the session.
Yeah, so before we get to any questions here, I just want to mention also that for ITA, for those of you who have not signed up yet for ITC, we do have a discount available to members. And so if you are a member already, you have access to that. And if you become a member, you'll have access to that. And it's a $200 discount that is available. So if you're interested, just reach out, or you can sign up through the website and we can share the code with you. All right, let's see. Any other questions that anyone has before we wrap up today? If anything pops up here. All right, I don't see anything coming through. So if we don't have any additional questions, we can maybe wrap it up a little early.
Awesome. Well, Josh, thanks for having me. For those that are on the line, if you want to reach out, you can find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with anybody and hope to meet many of you at ITC this year.
All right, great. Well, we look forward to seeing you there. Thanks for the great content, Michael, and we look forward to seeing the full half-day workshop.
Absolutely. We'll see you there.
All right,
Thanks
well, take care. We'll see you later.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.